Hello. So today we're going to continue our discussion about angles that are formed by a transversal. Remember what we said, a transversal is a line that crosses two other lines. Now today we're going to talk about a special situation, and that is if the lines that it crosses are parallel. So imagine that this line and this line, let's call this line M and this line N, are parallel. And this line here, P, is our transversal. It forms angles, as we discussed, but they have specific relationship. So let's look at corresponding angles first. As a reminder, corresponding angles are on the same side of the transversal in the same position. So an example would be example 1 and example 7. And angle 1 is on the top left on this line, line M. Angle 7 is in the top left for line N. So 1 and 7 are corresponding. And so whenever the lines are parallel, our corresponding angles are congruent. So that would mean that angle 1 is congruent to angle 7. Angle 2 would be congruent to angle 4. Angle 8 would be congruent to 6, and angle 5 would be congruent to angle 3. Corresponding angles are always congruent. That only occurs, though, if the two lines that the transversal are intersecting are parallel. So you first have to know they're parallel. So remember that to indicate that they're parallel, they will have an arrow on them that match each other. So a single arrow on this one and a single arrow on that one tells you that those two lines are parallel. Next, let's look at alternate interior angles. Alternate, remember, means on opposite sides of the transversal. And interior is between the two lines. So angle 8 and angle 4 are an example of alternate interior angles. And those are also congruent. So that would mean that angle 4 is congruent to angle 8. So if this one was 70 degrees, this one would be 70 degrees as well. Same for alternate exterior angles. They are also congruent if the lines are parallel. So an example of that would be angle 2 and angle 6. Angle 2 and angle 6 are alternate exterior angles. So I'm going to say here that angle 2 is congruent to angle 6. Next, we're going to talk about consecutive, meaning on the same side, and interior. So those would be like 3 and 4. Let me use a little orange here for that one. 3 and 4 are consecutive interior angles. Those are not congruent. You can tell that this one's an acute angle, less than 90, and this one's obtuse. Instead of being congruent, these are supplementary. They add up to 180 degrees. And that's also true for consecutive exterior angles, like 2 and 5. Acute, obtuse, those would also be supplementary. And as a reminder, vertical angles like 7 and 5 are always congruent. So angle 7 and angle 5 are congruent. Angle 4 and angle 6 are congruent. Angle 1 and 3 are congruent. And angle 2 and 8. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this example and see if we can identify whether they are congruent or supplementary. So 3 and 5 are alternate interior angles. Oops, sorry, you can't see it. There you go. Angle 3 and angle 5 are alternate interior angles, so they are congruent. And the reasoning is that they are alternate interior angles. You can abbreviate it like that. Angle 1 and 8. 1 and 8 are on the same side, so they are consecutive. Consecutive. And they are outside, so they're exterior angles. And so we said that consecutive exterior angles, look, this one's acute, this one's obtuse. They're clearly not congruent, so therefore they are supplementary. Two and 6. So 2 and 6 are in the same location, same position, just on different lines. That's called corresponding. And so corresponding angles are always congruent as well. Angle 1 and 7 are congruent because they are alternate exterior angles. Angle 4 and 5 are on the same side. So if they're on the same side and they're interior angles, they are supplementary. Again, you can see that one is obtuse and one is acute. When you add those up, they'd add up to 180 degrees. Those are consecutive interior angles. 3 and 7 are also same position, bottom right, bottom right. These are corresponding. And so, since they are corresponding, oops, I've got this in the wrong spot. That's supposed to be where I put congruent. Let me fix that real quickly. Congruent. And that's because they are corresponding angles. 5 and 6. Now, 5 and 6 are not vertical. They're not corresponding, but since they are next to each other and they are adjacent to each other, remember that they are called a linear pair. They make a straight line. A linear pair is always supplementary. So angle 5 and angle 6 are supplementary because they are a linear pair. They make a straight line, and so they add up to 180. Last, we're going to do 2 and 4. 2 and 4 are vertical angles, and so they are congruent. And I'm going to save example 2 for you to complete on your own for practice. And now I'm going to turn the page to page 26. On 26, we're going to fill in all the missing angles. All that we know is angle 6 is 142 degrees. So I'm going to write that here, label my diagram. And now we're going to find all the other angles. I'm going to start with angle 1. Because they are vertical, they are the same. So angle 1 is 142 degrees. The reasoning is because vertical angles are congruent. I'm just going to abbreviate it like that. Vertical angles are congruent. Angle 2 is going to be a linear pair. They form a linear pair. They're next to each other. They make a straight line. And so they are going to be supplementary. So therefore, the degrees for angle 2 is 38 degrees because they have to add up to 180. 1 and 2 are also a linear pair. That's the definition of a linear pair. All right, the measure of angle 3 now. So angle 1 and angle 3 are both corresponding angles. So they are congruent. So if angle 1 is 142, angle 3 is also 142 because corresponding angles are congruent. Let's find angle 4 now. Angle 4 corresponds to angle 2, so you could use corresponding angle here. By the way, since 2 and 4 are congruent, but they're not the same as 1, we're putting a double arc across angle 4. Angle 1 and 3 are congruent, so I have a single arc. Angle 1 and 6 is congruent, so I have a single arc. All right, so going back to angle 4, these are corresponding, therefore they're congruent, so whatever 2 is, 4 is the same. It is 38 degrees because, again, corresponding angles are congruent. Now let's find angle 5. Angle 5 and angle 4 have a relationship. They are congruent because these are alternate exterior angles. So whatever 4 is, 5 is the same. 5 is 38 degrees because alternate exterior angles are congruent. Angle 7, there's a lot of ways that we could figure out 7. I'm just going to go with 4 and 7 being corresponding. I forgot to mark angle 5. Let me put double arc for 5. 4 and 7 are congruent, so it's also 38 degrees, and that's because they are vertical angles again. And then angle 8 here is congruent to angle 3 because they are vertical angles. So angle 8 then has to be the same as angle 3, therefore it's 142 degrees, vertical angles. All right, now example 4 is a little more complicated because we have 2 transversals crossing these parallel lines, and if you go the opposite way, this is a transversal, but they're not parallel. This is a transversal, not parallel. So let's go ahead and look and see what we can figure out here. So it says that angle 7 is 38 degrees, so I'm going to put that here. It says that angle 10 is 102. Now, since I know 7 is 38, I can find out that angle, let's start at angle 1. So if we look at these 2 parallel lines, see the little arrows, tells us that they're parallel. Looking at these 2 parallel lines, this line is the transversal that contains both angle 1 and angle 10. 1 and 10 are on the same transversal across parallel lines. So 1 and 10 are same side exterior angles. When you're doing something like this, just ignore the other line and pay only attention to those 2. Look for the transversal. So if angle 10 is 102, angle 1 has to be supplementary. It has to be 78 degrees because 78 plus 102 adds up to 180. So I'm going to put 78 here. Now we can find angle 2 because angle 10 and angle 2 correspond. They're in the same location, so it is 102. Angle 3 is vertical to angle 1, so it is congruent to 1. It's 78 degrees. These 2 are congruent. And angle 4 is congruent to angle 2 because they are vertical angles, so it is 102. Now, angle 5 is congruent to angle 7, and these are different, so we need 3 arcs. I don't really have enough room, but I'm just going to squish it in here, 3 arcs. 5 and 7 are congruent because they're vertical, so it is, 38 degrees. Angle 6 is next to angle 5 and form a straight line, so they are a linear pair, so therefore they add up to 180. So I'd have to take 180 and subtract 38, and that would give me 142. Now, angle 8, which is next, is vertical to angle 6, so it has to be the same as angle 6. All right, next we're looking at angle 9. 9 is a linear pair with 10, so therefore they are supplementary, and so this would be 78 degrees also. Angle 11 is vertical to 9, so it's the same as 9, so it is 78 degrees. Angle 12 is vertical to 10, so it's 102. And then last, we're going to look here at angle 13 through 16. Angle 13 is on the same transversal as 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're going to compare these, and we're going to ignore this line up here. So 13 and 5 correspond. So 13 and 5 are equal. 5 is 38, so 13 is also 38. Angle 14 is an exterior angle. Angle 8 is an exterior angle, and they're alternate exterior, so they are congruent. So 8 and 14 are the same, so therefore 14 is also 142. Angle 15 corresponds to angle 7. 15 and 7 are in the same position, and so 7 is 38, therefore 15 is 38. And last is 16. 14 and 16 are both vertical, and so therefore whatever 14 is, 16 is the same. Okay, I'm going to save that practice problem for you to try. And let's look at what happens when we have to use algebra to find our measures. So these two lines are parallel. See here it says L is parallel to M. So we're going to look at the angles, determine what they are, and find out what X is. So these two angles are corresponding. They're both upper right. So therefore they are congruent. So 58 would equal 5x minus 2. So we would add 2 to both sides, and then we would divide both sides by 5, and that would tell us that x equals 12. Again, that was because they were corresponding angles. On example 2, these are alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles are also congruent, so 16x plus 22 is the same as 134. So we're going to subtract 22, and that is going to give me 112. And then we'll divide both sides by 16. And let me check what that is to make sure I don't goof. 112 divided by 16 is 7. So there, that one has to be 7. And then here on angle 3, this angle and this angle are on opposite sides of the transversal. So therefore they are alternate and they are interior. Therefore they're congruent. So alternate interior angles. And since they're congruent, I'm going to say 7x minus 1 equals 125. We're going to add 1 to both sides, and that's going to give me 126. And then we're going to take 126 and we're going to divide by 7, and that is going to give me 18. I'm going to save this one for you to do. No, you know what? I'm not, because it's a little different. These were all congruent. This one's not congruent. This one is same side interior angles. So if they are on the same side, we want to call that consecutive, sorry. They are consecutive interior angles. And so they add up to 180. They are not congruent, they're supplementary. So we would say that 9x plus 2, this angle here, plus this angle 133 equals 180. So 2 and 133 is 135. And so I'm going to subtract 135, and that's going to give me 45. When I divide by 9, x is 5. All right, that is all of your notes for today. If you have any questions, please just contact me.